Hey, everybody. Welcome to Game Audio Hour number 77. It's our weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative secrets to audio techniques. I messed that up, didn't I? Project experiences to audio secrets, creative ideas to housing techniques, and stuff like that. I don't know. None of you are going to speak up and save me as I butcher this thing to death that is behind my screen and I can't see, and I tried to do from memory, huh?
Game audio hour, everybody. Good.
Yeah. In-depth coverage of
Good.
Things that relate to gardening today.
Good.
Speaking of gardening, Mike, how are you?
Doing well. You know, it's raining in LA today, which I take to be the sign of some kind of impending apocalypse. So, in case this turns out to be our last show together, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure, and let's go out on a bang.
Yeah, this could be the end of days. Yeah, well, for those not in LA, in Southern California, we're dealing with a drought. I got a tough crowd of you guys. Vince, are you still working on technical stuff?
A little bit, just a little bit. My video feed is not showing that I am here at that game company, but that's okay. You guys have probably seen that enough. And but yeah, it's doing okay over here in Santa Monica, and yeah, I'd rather like a little bit more precipitation over here.
Yeah, indeed. And Alex, how are you?
Well, if you guys want water, we have plenty of it up here. I mean, over here in across the Pacific. Here in sunny, well, not so sunny today, but kind of cloudy, overcast Japan. It's a fine morning. I always forget that it's actually sort of evening for you guys, isn't it? I guess after we've done this for so long, you sort of lose track of the time doesn't seem to matter so much anymore.
Well, it matters for the three of us, but you won't move here to become part of that mattering.
That's because you won't employ me, Kyle. No. Anyway, we should just start off today by just talking a little bit of news about some things. There's some really big news, which we're probably not going to mention just yet, but that's super big. But just in sort of lead up to that, viewers will notice that previously, so just a quick recap on the history of Game Audio Hour. One fine day, about more than a year ago now, isn't it?
Tell us, Grandpa.
The esteemed Mr. Kyle Johnson decided to start up a game audio podcast, video live chat vidcast, and did so under his own account on YouTube, as you would. So if up until now you'll be used to seeing Game Audio Hour videos coming through as Kyle Johnson on YouTube. However,
we have put that
in lead up to the very, very exciting things that are happening for us, which we're going to be announcing very soon, you may notice now that actually we're broadcasting, the videos will be listed on YouTube as a Game Audio Hour account, the official Game Audio account. So
it's like
I should probably just take a little bit of credit for this because it was extremely exhausting.
Yeah, and so actually Alex is the one who put it all together for us. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So the leading up to what's going on, it actually I took a sort of a crash course in all things Google, and Google is complicated. Google is complicated. It's
and
very complicated.
Well hated, Google.
So what we've managed to do is migrate all of our Game Audio Hour videos and all of that from Kyle's YouTube channel to a new Game Audio Hour YouTube channel seamlessly, so that viewers won't notice a difference. It's just the videos are coming up as Game Audio Hour now instead of as Kyle Johnson. So one step at a time.
And creepily, Game Audio Hour keeps posting pictures, movies of my daughter. I don't understand why. No, wait, those are mine. No, so that's my way of saying that we have some migrating we still have to do. Like I have to get off of the Game Audio Hour YouTube page the videos that are related to me specifically, like tutorials that I've put up and fun stuff like that. But Alex has been just kicking butt at getting this all converted. I gave it a shot for like 10 minutes, and then I threw something at a Google trying to break it.
Yeah, I equate it to like grinding in a free-to-play game, because it actually took probably about, how long in total? About 2 or 3 hours to figure out how to do it properly without actually messing stuff up and losing subscribers and, you know, it's just so complicated because they have the YouTube channels and they have G+ pages and they have Google accounts. So these three things, sort of, they try to unify it all as being like under this big umbrella of a Google account, but it sort of works, but it sort of makes things more complicated if you've already started up channels and G+ accounts. I think if you're just starting. Sorry,
all
go
this
ahead.
is to say is that Alex now has a new career. He is $150 an hour, and he will convert. Alex, I get $30 of that $150. Finder's fee. And he will convert your Google from Google to another Google, so that you'll be on Google.
And in other news, we are the other thing that's happening is that at the moment I'm sort of in the process of doing a little bit of light rebranding of Game Audio Hour. So now that what we're going to be doing is rebranding the site, simplifying things a bit, stripping it down. We're going to be rebranding the YouTube page, the Twitter page, and the Facebook page. Things are sort of going to become a little bit more slick. Not to say that they haven't been slick up to this point.
They cobbled together at best, but we kept it alive and going, and now we're going to be like a real family.
Right. So we're just sort of moving one step at a time here. So anyway, over the next week and maybe the week after, if you're a frequenter of the GameAudioHour.com website, you may notice things sort of changing around or going a bit wonky, but we're going to get there one step at a time.
Yep. So with that said, thanks for sticking with us, and I'm grateful that we didn't lose our subscribers in doing this massive switch over. So thank you, Alex, very much. And on to today's topic.
We have a meaty topic today.
Oh, I'm almost afraid to bring it up.
This one is incredibly meaty. We've never actually done a dedicated episode about this, but we've kind of alluded to it in a few different discussions before, and it's a huge, huge one. So take it away, Michael. Did I call you Michael? Take it away, Mike.
Yes, well, as you know, we've been for many, many months wanting to do an episode entirely on Alex's hair and its resemblance to that of Morrissey, and I'm proud to be leading the panel today on this discussion. No, actually, I think since Kyle is the real instigator of this subject, I almost want to, in fact, I actually do want to hand the baton over to him to introduce, at which point I'm happy to chime in on my particular angle on this exciting subject.
Well done. So Alex threw you under a bus, and you somehow dragged me underneath it.
Yes, while catapulting my body out of the bus. So that's my parkour skills.
Today's topic is a discussion that we kind of keep having amongst ourselves, and it's an interesting subject to me because I was playing. Basically, the subject is genre-specific music to types of games. It's kind of a tricky subject. It's like I'm trying to find a nice way to say it. But why do big AAA titles always have orchestral music? Primarily, and why I'm seeing a trend in indies having a predominance for electronica and techno music and stuff like that. So I posed to the guys. I said, I played 2 games yesterday on the PS4 because I have that PlayStation Plus, and I always run out to buy the free games. And the 2 that I got yesterday, I don't have them listed in front of me, but they were September's games, and both actually really fun. There's a robot one, something about home. I probably should look it up, huh? So we have it?
Oh, it's called Gone Home.
Gone Home. That one's
Wait a minute, Gone Home or Grow Home?
Grow Home.
Yeah, Gone Home is definitely not about robots.
Robot and growing your plant in order to keep on climbing up.
Yes, Grow Home, and the physics on the robot is hilarious. If you play that game, the robot running around, it's all weird.
It's really clever. I've played it as well. It's a very clever game. I love the unconventional control. They kind of emphasize the fact that you control it in a very unconventional way, which you have to learn, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, you definitely have to learn it. And what was the other one? Do you guys remember what I typed or put into the chat? It was something about. It was a time-based side-scrolling shooter where you could roll back time a little bit. Both soundtracks and both the music in both of those games different, but electronic-based, and both really good. The the one that is about rolling back time, I think, is
Super Time Force.
That's it. That's it. Super Time Force. Thank you, guys. supertimeforce.com. That is, and I don't know who people are that composed for these, but Super Time Force has, in my estimation of all the games that I've played, the best modern version of a retro score. You know, where you can tell they were trying to do the old bleep and bloop kind of sound, but really did a fantastic job using modern equipment to come up with something catchy and limited sounding, just like the old games. So shout out for that one. But as I was doing that, and Jack, our very own Jack Minhorn, has done really well with the games that he's been involved in, putting a lot of electronic scores in those. So the question came, why are we seeing so many electronic scores in indie games? And then that poses a question that's related to a link that we had passed around, and also Vince reminded us of, where it was talking about. Well, Vince, why don't you describe the orchestral side of this argument for AAA and that link that article that went around?
Yeah, so there was an article on Classic FM that coincided with the Game Sound Conference that's in the UK. That was just last month, and it was talking about our soundtracks for AAA games kind of in a rut, and there were some composers that actually responded affirmatively to that there are a lot of soundtracks that are kind of samey in the AAA world. Okay, we got this big orchestra and it's doing its thing, and are those soundtracks interchangeable amongst each other? And then there were quite a few others saying, yeah, there are a lot of orchestral soundtracks happening in the big budget world, but BioShock is really quite different from something like God of War, and God of War is quite different from Peggle. Peggle has an orchestral soundtrack, right? But it's totally different. So maybe people are really too quick to say that, yeah, all of these games with orchestral soundtracks are all the same. But still, there was quite a bit of discussion there about not just orchestral soundtracks, but the overall direction of soundtracks among all games, both AAA games and indie games, Western games and Japanese games, getting the perspective from Japanese composers, and there were quite a few of them that actually said that orchestral soundtracks in video games are in a rut. And there's just a lot of different perspectives going around. And I just put a link into the chat room on that Classic FM article. And besides the actual written text, there's also a little snippet of a documentary that also broaches that topic, as well as reveals a little bit about what Japanese game composers went through over the years.
Yeah, here's a hypothesis. Could it be that the objective of creating a AAA game and the objective of like a group of 5 people creating an indie game differs a little bit, and AAA games inevitably end up chasing sort of a cinematic kind of quality, so making their games feel more and more like some kind of Hollywood movie. So obviously when you're trying to go for a Hollywood movie, then of course the discussion becomes, are Hollywood movie soundtracks in a rut? Which we're probably going to get some valuable opinions from Mike and Carl about, because I know they have passionate opinions about that topic. But if the AAA game is sort of aiming for this cinematic feel, then obviously they're going to go for an orchestral score, which is sort of a quick solution to get that. So, oh, wow, it sounds like a movie. It's really dramatic. Whereas an indie game, is it possible then, this is the hypothesis, that the objective of creating an indie game is often subconsciously, it's that kind of nostalgic feeling of retro gaming. And of course, when it comes to nostalgia and retro gaming, obviously because there are technological limitations on the hardware at that time, inevitably it's going to be more electronic sounding. So you've got your chip tunes and stuff like that, and then as an extension from that, you've got stuff from the 16-bit era, which of course is based in the 80s and the early 90s when there's FM synthesis all over the place. And then as an extension of that, obviously you easily lead into electronic dance music and electronica as a whole. So could it be that because indie games are subconsciously sort of heading for a nostalgic, often, not always of course, but heading for nostalgic retro gaming feel, they head towards electronica, and AAA games are after that big grand cinematic movie experience, so they head towards the orchestral score to achieve that. What do you think? That's just a hypothesis, but what do you think?
I think it definitely captures an aspect of why big and little games tend to go in these two directions. I think there are a number of different artistic and technical considerations at work, and one of the issue you pointed out of nostalgia and trying to capture the feeling of the roots of game music is definitely one of the artistic considerations. I think there are a couple of technical considerations to keep in mind as well, particularly if we think of mobile games in particular. Particular said twice there, kind of unnecessarily. Mobile games, of course, you're playing them on a phone or an iPad or something equivalent, and you're not often using headphones. Maybe a dedicated gamer might put on headphones, and a couple of games will actually suggest that. But by and large, you're hearing whatever's coming out of your speaker on your phone, and that's blending in with the ambience of the room. And you're getting already a very significantly reduced fidelity. So you may not, if you spent a lot of money and hired a live orchestra for your score, it wouldn't necessarily be the best use of those funds, which are presumably fairly limited on an indie game. But I think there's another issue at play here, is that the typical indie game, or definitely a typical mobile game, is going to be much more limited and focused in its subject matter. It's typically going to be an action game or a game with an action component. The duration of gameplay is often going to be shorter. The game experience will often be more casual. This may not be true for a PC indie game, but certainly for a mobile game. We're not expecting to sit down and spending quality time with that game and end up playing 40 or 70 hours. It'll probably be kind of a quick in and out experience. And you're limited by your input. You don't have a keyboard, or you do have a keyboard, I guess, but typically you're touching a screen on a mobile game, and the depth of interaction is not going to be as profound as what you might have in a AAA title. So what I'm getting at is if you're playing a parkour runner or some kind of physical action game, the mood is much more immediate and casual and fun, and I think those artistic elements will lend towards some kind of pop music, which will typically be electronic. If it's an action game, the music's going to be more propulsive, and electronic beats and drums and synth sounds are just kind of a natural concomitant to that kind of gameplay. And there are many, many exceptions, but I think this is one of the artistic elements, as well as some of the technical elements behind that distinction.
I was thinking also that a lot of indie games are side-scrollers. I think it's safely say the majority of indie games are side-scrollers. And when I try to think about if I were to write an orchestral score for a side-scroller, what would I do? Yeah. And it seems like that would actually seem difficult, and I would find myself emulating a bunch of stuff that I would hear in my brain that might lend itself better to electronic music anyway. A lot of rhythms and a lot of really fast chugging, kind of So I wonder if the genre side-scroller is what's dictating the sound. If our indie developers that are creating a side-scroller, are they getting in? I would be curious to find out if they got in a bunch of people who said, "I want to write music for your game," and did they get in any orchestral scores for their side-scroller cutscene that they sent out for people to score to, or was it all electronic? And then on top of that, in kind of layers of intensity for a side-scroller, what about a rock band? What about putting together drum, bass, guitar, keys, and just putting out some sort of modern rock or alternative soundtrack to that game? That seems also even more intense for a side-scroller that's got a bunch of action and jumping and a really fast pace. Maybe I wonder if anybody's gotten anything like that in. What do you guys think? Do you think the genre is dictating?
It's kind of funny because the first two game examples that I thought of when thinking about action side-scrollers are Cannibalt, which was one of those big original, oh my god, the iPhone as a gaming platform games. And also kind of a classic retro game, Contra. And so Cannibalt had a great soundtrack by, I think it was Danny Baranowski, and it was not your typical retro techno soundtrack, very electronic based, but also very cinematic and very moody. It's Cannibalt is this big, continuous running action set piece, and it felt like something that was really quite dark and nuanced, and the music constantly hinted at something more than just the action that was right there on the screen. It wasn't just let's do some 4 on the floor and have something that just matches this pace of running that you're supposed to do. It was really quite cinematic. And then you have something like Contra, where, it started out as this NES and arcade game from back in the mid-'80s, but all the late versions of Contra, whether it be done by the Japanese in-house composers or by dudes like Jake Kaufman, who's another California guy here, that's all very prog rock fusion stuff. And that's really cool. You got those awesome drums. You got these great guitar solos and synth riffs that are kind of like Jordan Rudess or maybe Satriani-ish at times, and it's really cool.
What's that game?
Oh, Contra.
Oh, Contra. Sorry.
Yeah. So there's some really cool things happening there. And
I'm not sure that. I don't know that it's possible to generalize and say that the majority of indie games are side-scrolling 2D games. I mean, that's obviously not today's topic, but it may have something to do with the ease of entry into these different types of music genres. So instead of looking, for example, at the majority of genre types in indie games, it might be worthwhile looking across the spectrum of people writing music for games, including your friend next door who's got a computer and GarageBand or whatever, who wants to knock together some stuff for your little indie game project. So including everybody who's writing music for games. I'd probably say that the majority of people who are writing music for games, is it possible then that the majority are people who are doing it with electronica versus people who are doing it with orchestral stuff, for a few reasons. Number one, and I feel I am qualified to say this because electronica is my thing, electronica is obviously easier to get into because as far as sort of the genre is concerned, there are less traditions and customs associated with the instrumentation of electronic music. That means that if you have a beat and you have some interesting use of samples over here and a few effects there and it's mixed really nicely, technically you have electronica. Whereas if you're going to go out and start making orchestral music, you need to have some understanding about traditions associated with orchestral instrumentation. It's much harder to just sort of grab orchestral essentials and just sort of have a go at it and just bang stuff together and have it sound orchestral than it is to grab some loops and some stuff and to bang it together in a DAW and have it sound electronica. Therefore, I would say that because the sort of the barrier for entry is a little lower with electronic music, therefore, when it comes to smaller projects, like, oh, geez, we need music for our game. Well, my mate so-and-so has, he's doing some music stuff. Maybe we can just ask him to do us a soundtrack. That mate is, if we're going to look at sort of, the numbers of people in game audio writing music, is possibly more likely to be into electronica than orchestral stuff, simply because of that lower barrier for entry. Now, that said, before all of my electronica friends flame me, good electronica, of course, is completely different. And that's I mean, you obviously with more experience and with more, for some people with more just raw talent, obviously you're gonna be achieving something more than just a few loops and a drum beat. However, I think that just because, for example, if you go out and buy Logic from Apple, you pretty much have everything you need right there to create. You've got loops. You've got. I mean, there is sort of orchestral stuff in Logic, but I think, as Mike probably attests, that the sort of the built-in orchestral stuff with Logic is a bit kind of weedy and not really that great. And you're not going to be getting your sort of orchestral mojo on just using the stuff out of the package from Logic. However, for doing electronic stuff, it's perfectly adequate, and there's a lot of great stuff that you can do just by sort of having a bit of fun with it. So again, this is evidence that sort of the barrier for entry for starting out writing electronic music is lower. And of course, as I said, because of those the less traditions associated with instrumentation and the way it should sound to make it sound orchestral versus electronica.
Well, Alex, so, I think you tackled the part of the subject that nobody wants to touch. There are a lot of people that want to write game music, and that's fantastic. That's a rising tide lifts all ships, and there's a lot of talent out there that is excited to get in and do this. But I think that affordability is the number one key to, that's my opinion, to electronic showing up. It's kind of a marriage of these two things. You've got, I don't want to get up on my soapbox, so I will be fast in that. There is an explosion of indie developers today. A lot of that has to do with the layoffs and stuff that were so profound in the game industry for so long, and hopefully is slowing down. And those indie game developers are people who have these skills to build games, and they've been with big studios, and they know how to do everything from scheduling to putting out great designs. But they have to do it on their own now because they're not employed, and they have to find a way to use the skills that they have. And so they put together a team of other friends that are laid off to come up with some sort of game company. But money is the issue, right? They can't afford to have the expensive toys or the high-end graphics engines that they're going to use, or licenses for some third-party software that's tens of thousands of dollars. And so their barrier to entry is limited by how much funding they have to do this task that is what they know how to do, which we all want to do that, right? We've been trained to do this, and we want to keep doing it even after a large company has let us go. Now, so there's this huge collection of indie developers out there, and then there's a huge pool of people trying to get into game audio. I think that right now, and Vince could probably speak to this, there might be more people studying game audio than ever in history. There are courses being offered at college for this now, finally, and there's a lot of resources out there trying to bring people up into this art form, and I think that's fantastic. That's what Game Audio Hour is all about, is sharing. There are other disciplines where they don't share, they don't want the competition, but I think that's what's great about game audio is we invite that competition and that kind of education that equally gets spread out among everybody. It's very inviting, and so there's all this game audio, there's all these indie companies. The game audio people who are getting into it are looking for an opportunity. The new developer with the experience is looking to save some money, and they merge together these two together. Now, with those merged, this goes back to what Alex is saying, and again, this is only my opinion. If you're new in game audio, you can't afford Sam's library of orchestral whatever. You can't get the Vienna Sound Library. It's just too expensive, but you are a musician, and you have some things to your disposal, and some of those things are a lot cheaper than going the orchestral route. And the need isn't there, I don't think. Again, relating back to what I was saying, I don't know how many indie developers are asking for orchestral demos from people. They might just be saying, let's get something quick and dirty that's very exciting, like Mike was saying. I think we've all touched on the points. And so that all comes together. I can afford it. I'm new in. This person says I need to get somebody who I can afford within our budgets, and let's put all of this together. I think it's everything coming together that has said why there's so much electronica in indie games.
I think another...
Oh, please go ahead, Mike. Oh, okay. I was going to say I should just qualify myself by saying that I'm not implying that therefore people who do electronic music are less educated than people who are doing orchestral music. Although it is true, as Mike will tell us.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, of course, being electronica is my thing, so it's my passion, my love, and one of the things that.
Wait, where does rock and roll fall in this? Am I like the dumbest of the crowd here?
That's going to be my question. Hold on, slow down, slow down. I think one of the beauties of electronic music. Matt M in the chat room, mighty Matt Miller is who graces us again with his esteemed presence, has saying that electronic music is almost like modern folk music, in the sense that it is accessible to most people, and the music is quite often the product of the artist's environment. And is there a difference between electronic music and electroacoustic music in regards to game audio? Yeah, this is a good point. I'm just coming to this. One of the good things I like about electronic music is that my love for it is similar to my love for graffiti art, because graffiti art is, in a sense, very organic, in that, of course, it's illegal and it's vandalism. However, when you pare it down to what it is, it's basically guys who go out writing on walls, doing stuff that they think looks cool with the tools that they have, and their influences are other guys who are going out writing on walls. You see? So, in a sense, electronic music is the same, because you do get these natural creations of sort of subgenres inside graffiti, because people naturally, it might be a way that humans do art together, as people start looking at what other people are doing, and sort of gradually they sort of coalesce together into sort of this category, and now we have drum and bass, or now we have industrial techno, or now we have electro, or whatever. So electronic music is kind of the same in that, because there's a lack of sort of heritage traditions associated with how to make it. There is that sort of odd freedom, and then you're able to you get these sort of formations of these new little subcategories of it, which is what makes it so interesting. And I think, Matt, electroacoustic music is sort of similar to that. My question, as Kyle was saying as well, is how come we don't see more instrumental music? Instrumental meaning actual music using instruments like guitars. There's a fair amount of guitar stuff, but not orchestral, not electronica, so to speak, but utilizing like a band. Could it be because organizing a band to create a song is logistically much more difficult, and then recording of that effectively is much more difficult than, say, just one guy with his laptop?
It could be that. I was thinking a little bit about that while you were describing the nature of general games development. This idea that there is all these AAA games and all of these indie developers that have eschewed the AAA space to do all their own thing. It's like, man, is that really a false dichotomy? And then I wonder, is it a false dichotomy? Because you look at the game marketplace, and there are all those AAA games that are in your eyeballs, whether because you're at GameStop or you're looking at a web page and you see the advertisements just blasting at you. And then there's all this other stuff on Steam or for $10 and less on PSN and those things. And it does feel like they're in these two very distinct different spaces. And what about that space in the middle? And I wonder if there's a correlation there. The fact that that space in the middle certainly doesn't feel as well represented when it comes to games and game budgets. And maybe that correlates with the space in the middle between, super retro, nostalgia, electronica type soundtracks, and then big orchestra symphonic soundtracks with the AAA games. I don't know.
I guess this is the birth of the...
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, this is the birth of the triple I, they call it triple I game development now, which is actually technically kind of the space that I'm in. I guess you'd call it, well, maybe like double I or single I don't know. But that's kind of the middle ground, I think, that you speak of.
Mm-hmm. So I was thinking there are specific sounds that games go for. Like a puzzle game has a specific sound across the majority of puzzle games. And first-person shooters have a specific sound across the majority of first-person shooters. Side-scrollers, I argue, have a specific sound across the majority of them. And I think that we could kind of sum it up rather quickly. If you come off the top of your head with this, what would you guys say? If I think first-person shooter, I think, a big, giant military-based snare drum orchestral score. And if I think puzzle game, I think quirky, weird sounds, could be orchestral, but kind of I can't think of the guys, Esquivel kind of sound for puzzle games. And then when I think about side scrollers, I get a lot of orchestral. But where I'm going, or sorry, I mean a lot of electronic. But where I'm going with this is that when I think about rock and roll, it's almost always, and correct me where I'm wrong, a Black Sabbath, hard rock, not that speed metal kind of thing. I mean, there have been games that have been built just with that alone in mind. Like Tim Schafer built the, what was that big guitar guy, the roadie who ran around and saved the world. There's a side-scroller, actually, that does use some of that sound, that kind of Black Sabbath-y sound, which I think it was called Swords or something. And you basically had successively bigger swords, and you just ran across the screen and just swinging your arm and wiping stuff out. But it was extremely enjoyable. That game was awesome, and even the artwork had those kind of concert poster kind of colors and scrawlings of the 70s. And there's a band called The Sword, which their music is very similar to the kind of stuff that people are looking for in games. Now, if I showed up and I said, okay, here's a rock and roll thing for you, and it sounds like Bon Jovi, I'm not going to get a lot of games. I don't think I'm going to pass that test for, hey, send us your Bon Jovi demo and we're going to put it in a game. But I think if I showed up with a Black Sabbath kind of thing and you had any kind of darkness to your game, I think I got a shot at it. So I think rock and roll has been limited by this period of time that people are looking for if they're going to put rock and roll in a game. Yeah. What do you guys think? Just coming off the top of my head.
Well, all genres musical genres tend to have an association with a time period or game genre. The orchestra is probably the exception in that it transcends era, and you can have an orchestral score in a prehistoric game setting where orchestral instruments hadn't been invented. But with rock in particular, or we'll call electroacoustic pop, it tends to be mired in the 20th century for obvious reasons, and it tends to suggest that topically. So unless you're going against the grain, unless you want to have a kind of Kull the Conqueror guy running around in medieval times with rock music in the background, it does get pigeonholed. That's not to say that the instrumentation couldn't be used to interesting effects that are not tied down to a time or place. You could do so many things with electric guitars. Kyle, I don't need to tell you that. But if you have the rock sound, the traditional drums, guitar, bass, maybe a keyboard if you're slightly more educated, it's we think of it as a kind of as limited to certain genres. You might have maybe some spy genres if you're going with the big band flavor of acoustic pop, or if you're doing a game like the Jack Black game, I think, where he was sort of I don't know if this is the game you're referring to, but there was kind of a heavy metal themed game he did 2 or 3 years ago.
Brutal Legend, as Chase pointed out in the chat room.
Yes, so that's where rock tends to get pigeonholed.
But
what were you going to say, Mike? I'm sorry, Alex. I wanted to hear that end of Mike's statement.
I think it was but in an ellipsis, so that's as good a segue point as any.
Sorry, Alex. I thought Mike was going to drop some massive knowledge on us right there that was going to break us into a new genre of games where we all made billions of dollars. No pressure, Mike.
I'm not sharing that with you. Actually, I'll take this occasion to address something Alex said earlier, because I thought he brought up a very interesting point, but I'm not sure I agree with that point. And what he was suggesting earlier in the show is that because the barriers to entry for music production in electronica tend to be lower, and orchestral writing tends to require a more sophisticated and perhaps more expensive skill set. Therefore, we more typically see electronic music in games. But I would counter that. I don't often see a game where I felt like it was screaming for an electronic score. I'm sorry, screaming for an orchestral score, but I guess they couldn't afford one, so instead we get an electronic score. I think typically where we hear an electronic score in a game, it feels like it belongs there because it's a contemporary action game or something futuristic or a platformer that Kyle suggested. And although I agree that the barriers to entry for electronic music production are lower than they've ever been, and writing convincing orchestral music has always been a refined art, I don't think that's one of the real reasons that indie games tend to have pop and electronic pop scores. I just think that the barrier to entry for game genres actually impel musical choices. I think it's easier to write a casual action game or a platformer than it is to write a persistent open world MMO or a game like Assassin's Creed or Skyrim. Those games require a lot of resources, and those resources aren't typically available to an indie developer. So indie developers, particularly ones who just want to get something out there and establish their authorship as a design studio, will, by financial necessity, pick a simpler genre, and that genre will in turn require simpler. That's not fair, but will lend itself towards electronic music. So I think what I would say, if I had to put this into a Stephen Hawking-like grand theory of everything, I'll say game genre drives artistic choice in music, and platform as well as practical considerations drive game genre. Hence the big dichotomy between crushing overwhelming massive titles with overblown orchestral scores and typically simpler, more down-to-earth, or more visceral and action-based games lending themselves towards electronic scores. And since we see so many more simpler games, we're going to see so many more electronic scores.
I've got a question. I got a quick question, Alex. I'm sorry. Hold on. Just 1 second more. So the crux of this conversation, though, is say that I'm good at writing electronic music. Let's presume, because that is not true. I write beats like the best old 40-year-old dancing man. So
like me, basically, yeah, sure.
Whatever. Kyle, lay me down a beat, and I'm like, boo, boo, right? It's a beat.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah, it's worth millions. So I'm really good at that, let's say. I love my machine. I've got all these cool sounds. I can write some really cool stuff. I got good, catchy, but I want a AAA title. I don't want to write another mobile game because, quite frankly, I can't get my bills paid, right? I mean, mobile games, let's be honest, they don't pay as well as some other game genre or some other, bigger studios, and you have to do a lot of hard work. Nonetheless, whatever you're writing for is hard work, but we still have to pay our bills. And let's say I'm trying to cross over, I'm trying to break through. Where do I go? Do I go to Infinity Ward and propose this for some Call of Duty stuff? Do I go to Tim Schafer and say, hey, Broken Age, here's my electronic score for Broken Age. It's really cool, and you could probably use it in your next game. I mean, where do I go with it? If that is what I do, how do I promote myself into a little bit, a little bit more money? Let's be honest.
That's. I think the first place you go is you go to Alex May and you join his club.
What's the club?
Because that's kind of me, really. Because I don't. That's what I mean. Because I've always wondered, why there is not more electronic music in movies to begin with. Why they all head in a similar direction. Not all, but I mean the large budget ones tend to head in the same direction. And game genres is the same as well. As you said, if you are very, very skilled at writing electronic music, like me, then how do you break out of those genres? And just coming back to what Mike was saying, it's a very, very good point, and I think that it basically alludes to the fact that unfortunately many game genres tend to be locked into music genres, and that is like cinematic music as well. That is the core of the problem. That's the core of the issue and the reason that things have developed it the way that they have.
And this comes back to the article that Vince posted that we're reading.
Right. So I couldn't help but think of bullet hell games. Because bullet hell games is very interesting because they're sort of, Vince will have to correct me on this, but I think bullet hell games are more or less you would class as being born in Japan, like a Japanese kind of genre. Is that right? Would you say that's right, Vince?
Yeah, certainly. It's there's a little bit of stuff happening recently with some of the more established Japanese developers getting some attention on Steam. You know, Cave has their shooters on Steam, and Treasure has been doing some things on Steam, but it's still very much a Japanese thing.
Right. And I think the bullet hell game is in because often the bullet hell games, they go for this incredibly anything that's really frantic, and of course we all know where that leads. But I'm not going to say it.
Black Mini.
No, don't say it. Oh no, the feed's coming down.
It has been summoned.
If you say Black Midi 3 times, you start hearing it. So we've got 2 on the show so far, so let's cut it off there.
It's the Haster version of game audio.
I got that.
Anyway, often you'll find sort of metal soundtracks, rock soundtracks, band soundtracks, sort of really kind of industrial, high-paced electronica soundtracks in bullet hell games. But some of the games also are much more. The soundtracks are much more tranquil as well. It's a bit more varied, dare I say. But it's. I think it comes back to then that idea that what you see visually and what you're experiencing as you're playing viscerally naturally lends itself to a certain genre. And is that a good thing or not? And where does that connection come from? Is it just from legacy of so many previous games having done it that way that you feel that the pixelated sort of 8-bit retro homage kind of game needs to have chiptune music?
So how do we change it? How do we change it? How do we introduce something new that is going to be genre changing for the next 10 years?
This may provide a tiny bit of hope, but I happen to have written music for a mobile bullet hell type game, and I actually wrote a orchestral score, kind of a fantasy-themed orchestral score for it, in defiance of all the generalizations we're talking about. The caveat here was that the game itself was kind of organic as bullet hell games go. It was actually a game called Wizard Ops, or Wizard Ops Part 1, and you were a wizard, and instead of firing off missiles, you were using your staff to shoot fireballs, and I guess the rate of combat was a little less frenetic than your typical bullet hell game. But it was in that genre, and it was a case where we used the theme of the story and the visuals to suggest a musical direction. So even though this is the exact opposite of what Alex is hoping for, in that case we're able to take a genre that did traditionally go with a kind of visceral, in-your-face electronic score and give it something more organic and orchestral. But if I were to take the question Kyle asked earlier and try to answer it literally, as if one of our listeners, viewers, were to ask that, which is if you're a beat roller and you want to target the AAA, what's a practical series of steps for you? I'll throw out a few there in case there are people watching the show who actually have that question. And one is you can try to collaborate, find someone who's got a background in the orchestra and try to work together and maybe come up with a hybridized sound that can make larger projects stylistically accessible to you. Another option is learn something about the orchestra to supplement what you already know about electronics. If you think of a movie like the Mad Max Fury Road, that was a kind of hybridized score that was very visceral and had a lot of drums and elements that we associate with game music or action game music. And he used the orchestra in a very kind of gut-churning, visceral way that was not at all the stereotype of an orchestral score. A lot of low strings scraping along, and that, I feel like to write that kind of score requires some orchestral chops, but a lot more sense of how rhythm works. And I think that having set such a strong precedent, we may find more opportunities for someone who's really in that artistic space who can learn a little bit about working with the orchestra, or to refer back to Plan A, team up with an orchestrator or co-composer, and then I think the sky's the limit. And the third choice is a little more quixotic, but you can also try to go against the grain and try to find a traditional AAA subject matter and pitch it as a drum and bass score or something that's off the beaten path that maybe earns some distinction. And this has certainly been done on more modest projects, and there's no reason a AAA project couldn't intrinsically try to go that direction as well. And why don't we have an electronic score for a strictly medieval RPG? It could be done with a gutsy enough producer, that's its own subject, but there's no reason it couldn't be at least approached experimentally.
Yeah, I agree. I think that last point is the most fun aspect of what we do, and it's the most challenging as well. Is that there's nothing I like more, and I know that Kyle likes this too, because he's mentioned it many times before. But there's nothing I like more when the genre is completely mixed up, and you're watching a game, you're expecting this kind of music, and it's not. It's that. It's like, whoa, that's cool. You know, one example of that, which was really really cool, was there's a game, Frontier make a game called Elite Dangerous, right? Which is this Elite Dangerous is this massive. Of course, we all know the original Elite, classic BBC game. Also Amstrad and ZX Spectrum and Commodore and all that. Anyway, Elite Dangerous, the official trailer. So up until the release of Elite Dangerous, they were showing bits of the gameplay and on YouTube, and they had incredible, fantastic orchestral score, because the original Elite has an orchestral theme to it. I think it's the Blue Danube that it plays as you're docking on the space station.
Yeah.
Which is like
But to throw back to 2001, basically.
Right, exactly. So of course you'd expect, well, Elite Dangerous, therefore, like the cutting edge, the latest release of this game is going to have an orchestral score, and it does, and it's wonderful. So for the official release trailer, what's it going to be? Of course, it's going to be you know, kind of what's his name? Crimson Tide. Who did Crimson Tide?
Polydorus? No, it was Zimmer.
Yeah, it was Basil.
Was it Zimmer?
No, it was Basil Polydorus.
It was.
Yeah. Anyway, like no, he did Hunt for Red October.
Crimson Tide was Zimmer, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, you'd expect that kind of thing, but it's not. Go and watch the official trailer for Elite Dangerous when it was released, like last year or whenever it was. It's this really cool indie rock band tune. And I think I remember a lot of people complaining about it because hardcore Elite fans saying, this is not Elite, what is this crappy music? But it's that kind of twist, I think, that when I saw it, I thought, nice! That's like really, really gutsy to go and take a game that you know it's going to have this big orchestral score, and then, you know, for the official release trailer, it's just this really cool, you know, indie rock band tune, which is was like a really cool little. So I think that, like Mike was saying, that third alternative that you have is the most challenging. Is to like take something that people would expect to have this kind of sound and do your own electronica thing on there. If you can do it effectively, that's the real for me. That's the holy grail, to sort of take, you know, a genre that people are expecting to hear in a certain kind of game and approach it from a completely different angle and have people say, wow, it's not what I was expecting, it's really different, but it works really well.
Now that's there is a movie called Suspiria. Have you guys ever seen Suspiria?
No.
Anyway, well, check it out. There's two reasons that movie is memorable. It's a Dario Argento film. It's a horror movie. The blood is the brightest red you're ever going to see, and it kind of takes you away from the gore, because the blood is so unrealistic that it actually makes these scenes almost not as scary as they would be, and that's in a good way. But in addition to that, the soundtrack for Suspiria, and it's in a series of 3 movies based on witches, which witches are the creepiest thing. Next to clowns, I'm just getting that out there. Clowns, number 1, witches, number 2. The soundtrack was done by a prog band out of Italy called Goblin, who I've luckily seen in concert. And Goblin is an amazing band, and when they put their methods into these horror movies, you end up doing exactly what Alex is talking about, but in a movie genre rather than in a movie medium rather than games, and that is creating a sound that you didn't expect to hear, but yet is completely memorable, totally fits the vein, and knocks it out of the park. If you get a chance to listen to the Goblin soundtrack for Suspiria, it will really change the way you think about how to compose music for games, because movies and games do relate a lot. And I bring a lot of that forward in my own way, because perhaps I'm waxing poetic about something that I just love anyway. But the truth is, when I was a young man and I saw those things, they imprinted upon me this idea of what music should be like for darker moments, whether that's a scary film or a sci-fi game that's got some darker moments to it. But do yourself a favor and listen to that, because that is exactly the case where what was happening traditionally was thrown out, and Dario Argento invited this band to come compose for his movie, and I long for the day that in games we are able to do the same thing, where there's a developer who says, let's throw out the traditional stuff, let's go for something new. I know they exist, and I know it has been done, but it's been done on such a small scale that it's not. Nobody jumps to my mind and says this developer is always looking for some new way to present their game, and that is proof positive that there are a lot of great ideas just sitting out there in the ether that can be used if people work together. If a developer wants something new and an audio person says, I think I've got something that would really work for this. Suspiria is definitely a soundtrack to check out.
And fans of the show Firefly, in a similar vein, know that you can take a sci-fi show and give it a country western electronica score that is at the same time extremely retro and weirdly forward-thinking. And in that case, you had a show that was equal parts cowboy, western, and sci-fi, and they decided musically to kind of go with the cowboy western more often. So in a similar spirit, there often are opportunities, at least in the film and TV side of things, to try to think outside the box.
That is a great suggestion, too, and that's absolutely true. When I first watched the show and heard all this like twangy guitar, I thought, well, it's definitely declaring that this show is really just a western. They just changed the location from a desert somewhere to a space somewhere. Great reference, Mike.
I guess no discussion of genre blending would be complete without the most dire of cautionary tales that I can possibly offer. And is when I went through film music school, they pointed out the score to the movie Lady Hawk as the worst decision in film scoring history. And for those of you who are uninitiated, I'll just quickly say it was a 1980-ish fantasy story with a young Matthew Broderick, and it was scored, and Rutger Hauer, yes, and very traditional kind of medieval fairy tale, maybe a little akin to the Princess Bride or something along those lines, but scored by the Alan Parsons Project, and it is reviled as it was a rock score, but it was a very generic kind of beer commercial rock score. And I won't say it destroyed the movie because the movie was kind of fun, but it's worth watching the main title of that film, which everyone can find on YouTube, as a cautionary tale about ill-advised bravery when it comes to musical selection. So,
yeah, and I will say the story that I have said before in the past that I joke about, and I will be very quick about it. There was a game in which I submitted an all EBO orchestral guitar score for that I thought was brilliant. I'm sticking by it, and I didn't get called back for some weird reason. I don't know what's wrong with those people. I'm still mad at them. But
whenever I think part of our responsibility as people in game audio, all of us really want the same thing. You know, we want more diversity in genres of music for game genre choices. And I think the best that we can do is when you find those examples, when you find those games that are doing something different with their genre that you don't expect, or if you're very fortunate like I am, where you're actually involved with a developer who says, we don't care what you do with the music, you just do it how you want, and you get to choose. I think making the most of those situations where you have, where marketing is stepped down and the game directors and producers say, no, screw marketing and what they say, you just do what music you think is good. You get those opportunities, take an advantage of it, and do something weird. And if you find that kind of game that's intentionally trying to do something a bit weird, then tell everybody about it. And it's the same thing. If you see like the Elite Dangerous video that needs orchestral music that has an indie rock tune, tell everybody about it. Go and get everybody to play Elite Dangerous because it's great. And they sort of took that gutsy decision to do something a bit different.
I want to end this with Vince, because Vince is in a position where he sees the development of the game coming along, and a decision has to be made where they're going to go musically with this game. And that basically comes down to Vince. Vince, how do you handle those situations? Do you go out of your way to find something unique? Are you looking for a marriage between a sound that's in your head and the development that you see going on in-house?
Yeah. I mean, when I'm, since I've been in-house here, I feel like it's my responsibility to explore at least as much as everyone else is. Starting from the beginning of the project, all the artists are exploring, the designers are exploring, the programmers are exploring. So I'm exploring where I can as well, and there's so much space to explore with, all the different genres as well as within the genres. So there's so much stuff that is rock. There's so much stuff that is electronica. Like right now, I've got this weird space that I've instantiated that's sort of electronic, sort of ambient, and sort of orchestral. And it's something that I got to after a whole lot of exploring, and I'm actually still trying to focus in, trying to hone in on exactly what that sound is. But when you have that chance to do that sort of exploration, you're really doing yourself a disservice if you just decide, well, I'm going to do this thing, whatever is the easiest thing to market, instead of actually trying to connect as closely, as tightly with everything else that's going on in the game that you're working on. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Well, I guess we should call it a show, huh? Our shows end up being about 1 hour and 7 minutes each. I thought that was kind of funny and ironic.
Well, there's so much we could keep on doing with this, but perhaps we'll... I know that there are a couple of questions that we could go into perhaps on a later date. The whole issue of music as marketing. The fact that with the big companies, it's often marketing departments and marketing budgets that are often used for musicians. That sets up different expectations on the composer's part for that. And there's a lot we could go into there.
You just touched on a huge one: marketing budgets used for musicians, because they're going to use this music all over the place. Limited budget for the game, and they reach out to find creative ways to include other people, and marketing is a big one. Absolutely.
Next show topic right there.
Oh, that's huge. Marketing budgets for musicians is huge, Vince. Why'd you drop that dime on us right now?
Hey, we got to keep people anticipating what's coming.
That's so true. My brain just went nuts. So, well, thank you for watching, everybody. Another fantastic show with these guys who I love hanging out with. And Alex, thank you personally for all the efforts you've put forth to kind of brand us into a central location. Thank you guys for all the good content and all the being here every week. I can't believe that I get to interrupt your day and drag you into this conversation. And more than that, I can't believe you listen to my crap. Thank you. So with that said, please follow us on that thing and tweet us on that other thing and spin us on this thing, because there's a new thing called spinning, right? Isn't there like some new social network called, I don't know what that's
PNR or something?
I don't know. Spinner. I don't know. That could be pornographic. I really don't know.
Don't go there. Don't go there.
I have no idea. We are not responsible for what your children see when this show ends. So with that said, I'm going to hang up before anybody does something dumb. And thanks, chatties, for all the questions and joining us. And, man, we love seeing you out there. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.